afternoon, Santa Clarita, and everyone else listening around the world. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. This is the kind of show where you can gain valuable insight and a better understanding of life and leadership distinctions to help you access your full potential and become more effective in all areas of your life. Joining me in studio today on the board is Mr. Andrew Delgado. Thanks for being here. And I have a wonderful, amazing woman with an incredible light. Her name is Roma Khetarpal. And I love this. Your title, your first title is a mom.
Yes.
And I think to me that's the most important. You're a mom. You're an author of a new book coming out we'll talk about later called The Perfect Parent. And you're the founder and CEO of what's called Tools of Growth.
Yes.
And on your website, you give amazing gifts called these tools to help people continue to grow personally and professionally. And your second title is a parentologist, which I love. Is that something you made up?
I did. I
love that. I'm actually a little jealous that I didn't think of that first. And as a parentologist, you advocate of mindful parenting.
Absolutely, yes.
And today I want to just open up a conversation to help people get clear about their commitment level to parenting, because I've always talked about and putting people into the question. And just this weekend, I was doing an advanced teen training where I invited the parents to be a part of the second day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the coaching and questions were really about how can I connect with my kids?
Right.
How can I get them to open up with me? And for me, I was lovingly confronting their commitment to parenting and putting them into the question, like, you know, as athletes, when you become really good at something, the difference between a good athlete and just a normal athlete is that the good athlete practices more.
Sure.
They took in more reps.
Yes.
They think about their craft.
Yes.
They're reading the books. They're doing the workshops. They're consciously educating themselves and working on themselves, as well as being self-aware and really questioning themselves, right?
You really hit the nail on the head, Alex, because truly parenting is a skill that can be developed to satisfy and deepen that connection, as you said, which is what parents are yearning for, which is what children are yearning for. And there's a lot of science behind that as well, where the most important thing to a child, and this survey research was conducted with young college kids. And truly, even at that age, the most important thing for a child is to feel connected with their parents, is family time. So yes, and talking about parenting, it's the most important job you'll ever do. It's the longest job you'll ever do. It's not something that you'll never not do,
Speaking for me, I don't know if I consciously remember making a conscious commitment to be a parent.
Right.
But whether it was conscious or not, I ended up becoming a parent.
Yes.
And then later on, a few years later, having my own awakening and my own conscious, growth.
Sure.
And deciding that, well, I'm a parent now. Why don't I commit to being the best parent I could?
Exactly.
Which started my journey.
Beautiful.
It started my
Beautiful.
personal development journey. And I decided I wanted to be the best father I can be.
Yes.
I want to be the best husband I can be, the best son, the best brother,
Beautiful.
And really work on myself. And it just started that growth process and headed me down that road.
And what a gift it is. I mean, we all commit to parenthood subconsciously. I think very few of us think, okay, so this is the time right now, this moment is when I am ready to be a parent. Even though you plan parenthood sometimes, which is a very common thing that, young parents are doing today, you're never really fully, wholly ready, and you never know what to expect until you actually have that baby in your arms and until you go through that miracle of life and you're hit with so many different emotions. And I also believe that, parents grow and change in different phases and stages of the child's life. So here's this beautiful child, this teacher, if you will, that, takes you through your own growth. Through their growth. We have to evolve with our children. And did we know any of this when we, as you said earlier, when we first became a parent? Never. Really, none of us actually sat down and thought about the different steps that we would be carried through in parenting.
Some of us do. Some of us, we're excited when we have our first baby and we buy the books, right? How to be a better parent.
Yeah.
And it seems like, you're committed up to a certain point.
Yes.
Right? And then all of a sudden...
Based on time availability,
well,
right?
yeah, and then also based on some of the other things that becomes more important to you, which is finding your job or finding your career,
absolutely,
or cleaning the house or making sure things are happening effectively in your home. And then I think it slowly, unconsciously, we put parenthood on the back burner, or we put it on the shelf, and that commitment isn't the same anymore. It's
taking it for granted, I think, more than anything else. I think that's what ends up happening in the hustle and bustle of life.
Yeah, for me, I think what I can attribute my growth in parenting is just making a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people look at making mistakes as like it's something that they don't want to do, and so they try to avoid making mistakes. I look at mistakes as my greatest lessons that I can learn from.
Platforms for growth.
So I give myself permission to take risks, get out of my comfort zone, and if I make a mistake, I actually welcome it as a blessing.
Yes.
If I'm willing to learn from it.
Beautifully said, Alex. And what better way to learn? The only way to learn is to make a mistake, I think.
When we come back from the break, I'm going to share some of the key mistakes that I've made and how I handled it. Maybe you can share some of yours, and we'll kind of just talk about that so that people realize that, being a perfect parent looks different in different ways.
Right.
And we'll talk a little bit more about being a perfect parent when we come back. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And welcome back to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm in studio today with Roma Khetarpal. She is an author of a book that's coming out soon called The Perfect Parent. She's also titled herself a parentologist. She advocates the mindful parenting and the conscious parent. And before we went on a break, I was talking a little bit about some of the mistakes that I've made as a parent and how pivotal those moments are for me in learning how to take myself to the next level. And here's one of the most important lessons I learned. There's a videotape that I have of some home movies of me and my family, and especially when I was younger. And it's specifically a video where me and my wife and my two young daughters and my son, he was probably about 6 or 7, and we're fishing at the lake. And his line got all tangled up. And he came over to me very innocently going, "Dad, can you help me?" And I'm watching myself, this younger version of me, really not patient and not confident in myself and not assured in who I am, and probably in my mind thinking and worrying about stuff and just being unconscious. And I watched myself turn over to my son and say something really kind of demeaning, not in a purpose way, but it was because it was my own stuff.
Sure. And
I watched this video, and every time I watch this video, and I'm already getting choked up now, it makes me want to cry because that's the part of me that's not my higher self.
Right.
But it woke me up to realize that's not the kind of dad that I'm committed to. And so watching that wakes me up to get some clarity about the kind of father that I'm committed to being.
And awoken some awareness within you as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I say this a lot of times in my training. I'll say sometimes you being disturbed is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Because some of the biggest breakthroughs I've had is when somebody either called me on something or I had to really look at myself deeply and kind of own up to it.
Yes.
And it disturbed me so deep that it caused me to flip a switch inside of me and say, that's not who I get to be. That's not, one, the way my parents raised me, or two, how I want to show up in the world. And so I'm now going to make a new commitment to something different.
You know, Alex, this reminds me of a tool that I have in a book, in my book, in Reasonable and Responsible Parenting. And within that chapter, I talk about the difference between reacting versus responding, what the emotional underlying stuff is that gets us to react versus respond. And in that I talk about this, that, we are bound to make mistakes as parents. We're human beings after all. And if we don't make those mistakes, then how will we access our higher self? So beautifully said. How will we access that awareness within us? How will we awaken that conscious parent within us? And one of the simple tools that I give also is to reflect, redirect, and reconnect. Because once you just make that commitment to reflect And sometimes we make the commitment to reflect, and sometimes it happens naturally, as you just said in your example where you saw the video of yourself and it awoken something in you and shook you up. And you knew at that point that you had to redirect what you were doing. You reflected on, your current behavior, and you redirected yourself to, again, reconnect. And usually what I love about these tools is that when you become aware, you connect more deeply with your kids, because now you're working from a higher self. You're working from a platform of self-awareness and deeply connecting within yourself with yourself. And that really helps you bring that outwards into the connection with your family and your children.
I love how you brought the two distinctions. You talked about not the self-reflect. You talked a little bit about where you're checking in with yourself, right?
Sure.
And the responding. You said respond versus react. And those two distinctions are important because I look at it from the come from. And your come from, when you're reacting, is like an unconscious response.
Right.
You're not even aware that you're in reaction.
Well, we call it impulsive.
Right?
Absolutely, yes.
And then when you're conscious and you're in the moment and you realize that you have a choice and you can take a deep breath and you can stand on neutral first and allow things to be what they are, like it is what it is, and then I'm going to choose to respond.
Right.
So one is I don't realize there's neutral and I'm just this reaction machine.
Sure.
Versus I do have choice and I can make my own decisions, and from that position now I can respond accordingly.
Absolutely, and this comes with with the process of building. Once you shift that perspective, and I call this the parenting makeover in the book, once you shift that perspective, then you start to see more and more, just by being aware of one simple situation, one singular situation, you turn the switch on, you've turned the light on within yourself, and that is a conscious and subconscious commitment to be that mindful parent, and you'll catch yourself more often. And again, it takes practice, it takes time, but definitely above all, it takes that willing to commit. As you said initially, that willing to commit to be more conscious of how we speak to our children, accepting and respecting them, and honoring our children just as we would honor a guest in our home or a dear friend or a family member or anyone that we have a lot of respect for.
Here's a very interesting perspective for me is that if before I had my awakening of consciousness, and it's not like all of a sudden I woke up and I stayed like that. It's a constant every day, all day long, every minute, every hour. But before I had that big awakening, that big spark, if you told me that from your perspective I was unconscious, I wouldn't even conceive of it. Well, no, right. I would have argued with you that I feel like I'm aware and
you defend your stance.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because for me, it was like you don't know that you're unconscious until you have that awakening.
Sure. Prior
to that, if I would hear people speak about consciousness, I didn't know what they were talking about. I knew as a concept. But until you have that experience, like that life-altering experience that wakes you up.
Alex, is that single moment of open-mindedness and open-heartedness all at that same coincidental point. I think that's what brings about that conscious awareness, almost like you're looking at yourself from the outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's incredible.
We'll talk more about parenting. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And welcome back to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today I'm in studio with Roma Khetarpal. She is the author of a book called The Perfect Parent. And today we're talking a little bit about parenting and the conscious parent and, sharing a little bit about some of the things that we've been working on ourselves. And I like to use myself as an example. And speaking about example, that was one of my biggest wake-up calls was looking at my lifestyle. So I had my wake-up call at 23, but I struggled a little bit in 24 and 25 because I wrestled with the part of living your life to be the example for your kids.
Yes,
I really struggled with man, so you mean I can't say and tell them what to do? I actually have to live
Do it myself.
Yeah, and it wasn't probably until about I was 25 or 26 when I slowly started to surrender and embrace. I'm going to have to make these changes within myself to see it show up on the outside.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm a hypocrite, right?
Right.
And it really won't. And I've also heard, some of the best coaches in the world, and some of the enlightened ones talk about kids watch more what you do and they learn what you do rather than what you say.
Absolutely. That's so true. That's such the truth. And I have to tell you that our children will teach us. I remember Natasha, when my daughter, when she was 4 or 5, she asked me a simple question. We were spending a few minutes together and she asked me, she said, Mom, who makes your rules? And I thought about it and I said, well, for lack of a better answer, I said, God makes my rules. And she said, well, I know you make my rules. Why can't God make my rules? So I kind of wanted to find out where she was going with this. So I asked her, why would you want God to make your rules and not your parents? And she says, because Grandpa says that God, when he talks in a soft voice. When you talk about rules, you always scold me. And you always say, how many times have I told you to pick up your things? And I really thought about what she said. How true is that? When we're talking to our children, we tend not to be mindful, not be aware of how we're saying that to them. And our children will mirror that back to us before we know it. I had this habit of putting my hand on my hip and saying, really? And I found, my daughter at age 6 saying that to my 3-year-old son when he picked up something of hers and she put her hand on her hip and said, really? And I thought I was looking at myself.
Yeah, you saw a mini me there,
mini
right?
me,
Yeah.
Exactly. So yes, you're 100% right. It's when we become conscious and aware, and it's in that moment, as we talked about in the last segment.
When you say our kids will teach us, our kids are teaching us.
Every day.
But there's a but in this. The question is are we allowing them to teach us? Are we allowing ourselves to be taught by our kids?
Are we listening?
Are we watching?
Yes.
Are we learning?
Yes.
Are we letting them tell us what they need from us?
Yes.
And that's all a conscious a presence, an awareness that you can only see it from that perspective, because there's a lot of parents that when I get them in trainings and they're asking these questions, they don't have no clue from that perspective.
Right.
They think I'm the parent, and they still coming from the way their parent taught them.
Sure.
Do it
because
I said so. And they're so programmed that I'm me, you're you, I'm the one, I'm the boss, and this is so and that's all for me. From my perspective, it's all an unconscious programming that they're doing, and it's not if they wake up
pick up on it, right, Alex? Because what is one of the most common things that children say to their parents? You're not the boss of me. They say that all the time because we do act bossy when we are directing our kids. And I often say that parenting is not a dictatorship, it's a directorship. We have to direct our kids versus dictating them. How else are they going to learn the value of our parenting? How else are they going to build their character if we don't build those foundation blocks for them, if we don't pave that road for them?
Here's a good possibility of why we would be a dictator, why we would be bossy. And the possibility is that we don't have any other tools. We haven't grown interpersonally to be able to be confident enough and figure out how to reinvent ourselves so I can communicate in a different way that you're hearing me. Or I can be more vulnerable with you, so I hook your heart, and now I have your ear, and I'm now the power of influence.
Yes.
If you don't know any of that, the only resort you're going to go to is I'm just going to manhandle you.
That you're used
I'm just going to try to control you the rest of your life.
Right. I believe that each one of us within us have what I like to call our PGS. It's like a GPS. Your parental guidance system, and that parental guidance system is the combination of our parental instinct, which each one of us has that, that fight or flight, that instinct to protect our kids, to make sure that they're taken care of. All of us have that innate instinct.
Can we call it the perfect parent instinct?
Sure. In the introduction of the book, I clearly say that you are perfect just the way you are.
Yeah, that's why I brought it. That's why I brought it up, because
exactly.
If you read the title, you can very easily go off in this tangent like, what do you mean perfect parent? There is no perfect parent.
And that's why it's in quotes, Alex.
Yeah,
yes,
and then when you read it and you read a new perspective, a new possibility that, you know what, we're all the perfect parent for our own child.
Yes.
And that perfect parent could be that gut instinct that tells you you have what it takes to guide your kids to be successful in this world.
And we all have that parental instinct, and I like to call it the PGS, or that parental guidance system. We all have that in us. And the second the second facet of the parental guidance system is communication tools. And we could all use some help with that. Even today, when I listen to, for example, I was listening to Dr. Shafali Zabari. She was recently on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, and she did a life class. You know, when I was listening to her, I learned so many things from her that are applicable now, even now as I parent my young adult children. So if we keep ourselves open to that idea of learning and growing constantly, then we create a harmonious shared space with our children. We're sharing the space with them anyways. We're sharing the space with them from the time that they've come into our arms. That's just what we do as parents. And what could feel better for both parent and child than to make this space sacred, harmonious, and a place where we can commune, where we can communicate with each other. The word communicate really means communing, coming together. And it doesn't necessarily always meaning agreeing with each other, but at least being able to talk about things. And I tell you, I mean, I'm constantly learning communication tools that I apply with my children day to day. And you can never be done with that.
When we come back from the break, I want to talk more about communicating. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And welcome back to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today I'm in studio with the perfect parent, author of that book, The Perfect Parent. She's also a mom. And so you have, how many kids do you have?
I have two.
You have two kids?
Yeah, Natasha's 25 and Navin is 23.
And have they taught you how to be a parent?
Absolutely, all the time. And they continue to do so. I think as long as we commit to be open-minded and listening to them, you continue to learn from them. And I have to tell you, as the kids get older, it's been hard, but I've had to really apply more and more of what I advocate in parenting is guide and step aside. You know, I think that's sort of the tough thing to do, and you don't know when to start that and when the right time is. But as the kids get older, and if you listen to them with an open mind and an open heart, you will know when to do that and how to do that so that you can continue to learn and grow with them and from them.
You know, I talk about two different parenting styles in my workshops for parents, and it's when the kids are born, there's the controlling, managing style parent.
Right.
Like your son or daughter needs you to guide them and tell them where to go because you don't want them to injure themselves or hurt themselves. So you're the one that's going to manage and guide them. When they start to have a voice, and they start to realize, wait a minute, I have a voice. I can say no, or I can debate that, or I can, contradict, or whatever it is. At a certain age, 6, 7, 8 years old, the wise parent learns, oh my God, I have to switch my parenting style. I have to reinvent a new style. And I call that the coaching parenting style, which is asking great questions.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
Right.
Why did you choose that?
And open-ended questions.
That's what I meant.
Yes.
Open-ended questions that leads them to self-reflect and discover their own answers for themselves.
Sure.
To realize that they are powerful enough to have their own mind and their own decisions.
Absolutely.
And I think that when parents get to a certain age, or when the teens get to become teenagers, right? The parents struggle, the ones that haven't figured out how to develop that coaching style personality, because now the kids don't want you to manage them anymore.
And it's not about control.
Right.
Yes.
They don't want you to try to control the outcomes or tell them what they're doing right or wrong.
Right.
What they need from you is for you to be loving, compassionate.
Advice.
And ask questions.
Sure.
Ask them the questions to draw out those answers.
Right.
One of the things that I love most, and I said this before the break, was we were going to talk a little bit about communication.
Mm-hmm.
One of your last interviews that I was watching, you were talking about communication in the three components, which was thoughts, feelings, and expression.
Absolutely, yes.
What I've been noticing is that, and this is just from my perspective, it's not that it's right or wrong or the truth, but from my experience, people haven't learned how to express themselves fully.
Yes.
And so the communication gets lost in having the thought. Some of us aren't even feeling our feelings.
Yes. I think that's where
we're not expressing ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly where the issues come in, is when we don't allow ourselves to feel those feelings ourselves as parents. And I talk about this in the first tool, which is honorable parenting, is accepting and respecting not just your own parenting personality and who you are as a person, and accepting and respecting your children and their personalities, but also accepting and respecting the feelings that come with this huge commitment and responsibility towards parenting your children. And once we manage those feelings, it's all about a communication balance. Once we manage our thoughts, manage our feelings, then we are able to carry those thoughts and feelings into our expressions more openly, so that the child is able to comprehend what we're saying. And it's really, it takes a little bit of practice, but if parents can get into the habit of, what I like to call building emotional intelligence, managing those feelings, emotional intelligence, and there's so many researchers out there, Dr. Daniel Goleman, John Gottman, and Dr. Christine Carter talks about this in her fabulous book, Raising Happiness, that, we are our children's emotion coaches. If we coach our children through their emotions, then the benefits that they will have, not just academically, and there's science and research to prove this, but life success is priceless. It's a gift that we can give our kids. So most of the time, communication between parent and child is about turning down that volume of the emotions by doing what I like to call dealing with the feeling, which we can talk about in the next segment. If we can manage our children's emotions and our own first, of course, then we can activate that intellect. We can invite that intelligence to come in and to start reasoning and making sense of the situation so that our expressions can match our thoughts and feelings.
Well, I'm glad you brought it back to taking personal responsibility from the parent, which is we have to first be able to feel our feelings.
Yes.
Experience our experiences first, because we can't be managing their emotional intelligence if
true.
we're numb and disconnected and robotic.
So true.
They're going to look at you going, are you kidding me? You're telling me that I can express myself freely around you, and you're disconnected. We're sending the wrong message.
Absolutely.
And the music behind the words isn't matching the words. And so you have to work on yourself as a parent. You got to be willing to be vulnerable in front of your kids. If you feel sad, express your sadness.
Yes.
If you need to cry, you feel like you're crying, cry. What gets in the way is some of the self-limiting beliefs now that we've created, like men don't cry. Crying is a sign of weakness. We got to shatter all those
or
types of
stopping a
things.
baby. We tell our children that all the time. Yes.
So we got to work on all that stuff so that we can be free to be human.
Yes.
Be free to express ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that, I love those three distinctions, the thoughts, the feelings, and expressions. I just feel from my experience that we're getting stuck in the era of just thoughts. Where like happiness now is a concept.
Thinking through everything, yes.
When like I have a friend of mine, he's very analytical, and we're doing something fun, and I'll look over and I'll say, "Are you enjoying yourself?" And he'll say, "Yeah." And I'll say, "Well, tell your face, because your face doesn't know that."
And
it's almost like the possibility that happiness for him is a concept.
Yes.
It's not a feeling. He doesn't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
And he's definitely not expressing it, because most people don't know that he's enjoying himself because of the way he's showing up.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Very interesting stuff. Let's keep this conversation rolling. Stay tuned for more. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And welcome back to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Today I'm in studio with Roma Khetarpal. She is the author of a book called The Perfect Parent. I read a little, bits and pieces of the book only because I've been on a nonstop schedule.
Yes,
but obviously, if I had some time, I would have sat there and loved to read the whole thing. But just the parts that I read, I just opened up my Word doc and started writing a bunch of great pieces that I was getting from it. Absolutely. One of the pieces that you talk about in the book is it says that we're spiritual beings. I talk about a little bit about spiritual beings, right, having a human experience. And I mean, I love talking about focusing on the spiritual part of us. And when we talk about spiritual, we're not necessarily talking about religion.
Sure.
We're talking about the human spirit.
Right.
And do we really spend enough time?
The essence who we are. Yes.
And the essence sometimes speaks to us in our intuition.
Right.
That gut feeling.
Yes.
But really we have to be aware. And what message are we listening to? Are we listening more to our brain, which is designed to keep us safe and protected and not feeling pain, which doesn't let us feel? Or are we listening to our spirit, which is saying, of course you should feel that. That's what you're designed to experience those things.
Yes.
And it's okay to hurt.
And I think that really, Alex, that attitude helps us work through things instead of around them, which is really an important part of even parenting.
I love that. Work through things
work
rather than
through
around
the
them.
feelings and work around them. Often we teach our children to work around the feelings. Well, there's no need to feel that way, we might say. You're just exaggerating, or you're just blowing this out of proportion, instead of allowing them to work through the feelings. I talked about dealing with the feeling in the last segment, and following those 3 steps of spot it, say it, okay it. In this tool that I give, and a very effective communication tool that I give, that's called dealing with the feeling. So the 3 steps is spot the feeling, say it out loud. I know that you are angry right now. And then, okay it. I completely understand what you must be feeling. I would be angry too if my brother, stole my iPod without my permission. That really turns the temperature of the emotion down, plus allows the child to work through the emotion instead of around the emotion.
Another way I've heard that is called feel, felt, found. I felt like that before. What I found out is that this is the way I got through it.
I love it.
Or I feel your pain. What I found out before when I've gone through it is this is how I handled it.
That's beautiful.
And it lets them know that you've been there before.
Sure. So it validates.
And you're not telling them what they should be doing. They're not hearing it from, okay, now again, you're telling me what I should be doing.
Right.
Instead, you're letting them know that you too have felt like that.
Sure.
And then by saying this is what I found out, it's kind of like this is what I discovered about it. And it's totally, and it's neutral, and it's just a suggestion. If you want to take it, great. If not, figure it out on your own.
Sure. And I think those are all great steps of empathy. And if we can be empathetic to our children's feelings, if we can put ourselves in their shoes and feel what they're feeling, then it will naturally, without much effort, very, very naturally, change that response, change that reaction into a response, if you will.
Absolutely. One of the things that, I was reading from the book is talking about being equipped with the intuitive power, which is a little bit about what we were talking about. You said this instinct is just as every parent has within us.
Yes, yes. The parental instinct, I think that the minute that our children are born, the minute that we hold them, that natural instinct is innate to all of us. We all have that natural intuition, that instinct to protect our children, to want to connect with them deeply. But somewhere along the line, as we talked about in our first break, somewhere along the line, we lose touch with our children because we lose touch with ourselves. We lose touch with how we are thinking, how we are feeling, how we are expressing. So that communication balance gets disrupted between parent and child because our internal communication balance goes off.
I like how you explained that in detail about, looking at your child, and I call it falling in love with your child, right? When you see them and you're staring at them or you're feeding them. And I watch mothers as they sit there and they feed, they're gazing into their eyes, and you can be locked into your child's eyes for probably 2 or 3 minutes and get lost in it,
and
right?
So beyond the physical connection, right?
And so what if we lived our life figuring out how to keep falling in love with our kids every month, every 3 months?
Stay in love with them.
To continue to stay in love. And so a lot of times when I do teen and parent workshops, a lot of what I do is put them in exercises, experiential exercises, where you can just connect with them, eye contact only, 2 minutes, ready, go. And you'll see the parents will break down.
Yes.
They will be bawling, and then the kids will be bawling. It's because they've been so disconnected for so long. They forgot what it's like to be in love with each other.
And make that human connection, which is how it all started, which is how that miracle of this relationship started to begin with. That's a beautiful example, Alex.
So if I can put you in a room and give you create the safe place for you guys to interact and reconnect and fall back in love with each other, then all of a sudden you get clarity. You can walk out of my training in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and you can start to get some clarity about finding your own solutions and your own answers because you have them within you.
Yes.
Because you're the perfect parent for your child.
Exactly.
Right?
You are the perfect parent
That's
for
right.
your child.
Well, stay tuned for more of listening to How to Be a Perfect Parent. You're listening to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And welcome back to Life Leadership with Alex Urbina, right here in your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS, in studio with Roma Khetarpal. Are you having fun?
Oh, so much fun.
I'm having a blast.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, absolutely. And I love, having deep, meaningful conversations, opening up possibilities to learn from other people as well as to learn from ourselves, because I know that that what you're teaching, you're actually learning it 10 times.
Yes.
They say that whatever you want to learn, you got to teach it.
Yes.
So you learn a little bit and teach it, and then learn a little bit more and then teach it. Some people think they have to know it all before they can teach.
There's no such thing, right?
And so you have to just, get in there, learn as much as you can, and then teach it to someone else, and then you're actually learning
from them
and yourself, and then pushing yourself back up.
Absolutely.
There's a part of your book that I want to talk quickly about, and you talk about understanding myself took the edge off of parenting.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
It's that connection with yourself. It's that same moment of awareness as you talked about in that very first segment. As I became more and more aware of how I spoke to the children, how I reacted to them, how I directed them, or dictated in many cases.
Right.
As I started to become more aware of my own behavior with my children and many a times with myself and my inner talk, that inner dialogue that we have constantly going in our minds, as I became more and more aware of it, I was able to understand myself from a completely different perspective, almost from an outsider's perspective, being able to view my own behavior. I really have to say that was very foundational for me in really harnessing my true potential as a parent. I think at that point I started to touch that tip of that iceberg, and I realized that I have so much more in me that I can and should give to my children than I am currently giving them.
That's amazing. For me, when I read that, when it says understanding myself took the edge off of parenting, I reflected back on my own experience and the part of me where I'm starting to learn and understand more about myself. I actually build more confidence in my ability to create anything I want. Mm-hmm. So if I now start understanding more of myself and I gain more confidence in myself, in the ability to overcome or adapt and overcome and then make new choices, create different results, then of course I'm confident enough to be any kind of parent I want.
And Alex, that confidence comes not just from feeling good yourself. That confidence multiplies when you make your child feel good and that response you get from them. So confidence really is a two-way thing, not just in parenting, at least, not just what you feel within yourself. That confidence doubles up when your child says, "Thank you, Mom, for listening to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being there for me." And you realize that 2 minutes of patience, that 2 minutes of taking a deep breath and being able to listen to them complete their sentence without interrupting that thought, that builds their confidence and yours.
Well, those are your results coming back to you.
Yes.
When your son or daughter
reflecting back to you.
When your son or daughter comes to you and says, "Hey, can we chat?" You want to take a deep breath, turn around and go, "Yes."
Yes, exactly.
And then turn back around and go, "Yes, what do you want to talk about?"
Exactly. It's being approachable as a parent. How do you make yourself approachable, which is the second tool in my book? How can we make ourselves more approachable to our children? And one of the tools that I give is taking 5. I call it Take 5. Take 5 minutes to unwind with your kids. Take 5 minutes with nothing on the agenda. 5 minutes of nothing whatsoever. Just being able to hang out with your kids and creating that platform, letting them know that you are there for them. And that then leads into the amazing conversations that we end up having with our children.
Absolutely. I love that you said, get in a space of like nothing.
Yes.
Out of nothing, you can create everything.
Yes.
So just being in silence with your son or daughter, let's go to the backyard and let's just sit for a minute.
Hang out.
You sit for 5 minutes, you're looking around, you're staring at the stars or the birds or the trees, and in that nothing will create, hey mom, hey dad, I was thinking of doing this.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden now you're in this conversation where you're connecting.
Exactly. You've spoken very much to
But
the
if we're
point.
too busy filling our space with, 5 hours of Facebook at night,
Sure.
or we're watching the shows that probably we don't even remember later on who did what.
Right.
But made a commitment, like you said, just 5 minutes.
Yes.
Or 10 minutes just to connect with our kids. I think that we're going to find a deeper, more rich experience with our kids.
And long-lasting relationships with our children.
We only got a minute left. Tell me about your book and how do we get this information?
Sure.
How do we plug into that?
Alex, the book will be published and available October 1st. Currently, it is available on Amazon for pre-order and on Barnes & Noble's website, of course. It's not available at Barnes & Noble in the store. However, for our audience here in Santa Clarita...
Wait, are you going to drop a little special on us?
Somewhat.
All right.
We are having a book signing.
Nice.
On October 10th at 7 p.m., and that's open to...
Is that in town?
Yes, at Barnes & Noble in Valencia.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome.
So October 10th at 7 p.m., and then there's also a educators speaking engagement that I will be speaking at that Barnes & Noble has invited me to on
Such
October 16th.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I have a feeling
Thank
that
you.
there's no accident you and I ran into each other in this
Yes.
lifetime. I appreciate you.
Thank
We're
you.
here every Monday from 1 to 2 p.m., so thanks for joining us on Life Leadership with Alex Urbina. Stay tuned for The Real Side with Joe Messina right here on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS.